Why, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Navient's webinar on streamlining your agenda process with OnBase. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules. We surely realize that this is a sacrifice for you, and we hope that you find benefit in this webinar. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started here. Since this is a webinar, everybody is muted. So that we can record this. Yes, we will have this recording available off of our website later in the day. If you do need to communicate with us, there's a chat box that's available in the GoToWebinar panel. And there will be time for questions and answers at the end of this webinar, so please use the questions panel for any of those questions. We'll queue them up for the end of this particular webinar. And also, once you finish up the GoToWebinar and close that down, it's going to prompt you for a survey. Please just take a few moments to complete that survey. That gives us some valuable feedback for how well we did. And also, there's an area in there for any future webinar topics that you might have recommendations for. We love to answer your questions as we go forward. So really quickly for the agenda, we'll go through some introductions, and then we're really going to be talking a lot about OnBase and the agenda management module. Some current state, there's a variety of different features that are available inside here, and we'll actually do some different walkthroughs of the product. And as we mentioned before, we'll leave some time for questions and answers. My name is Guy Schrader. I am with Navient, the host of this webinar, and I am the Manager of Sales Engineering. And along with me as a presenter today is Chuck Dushan. He is with Highland Software, which is the developer of the OnBase product, and he is a senior customer advisor. So with that, really quickly, just a little bit of background about Navient. Navient has been around since 1986. We work in the enterprise information management market. And really what we're talking about there, as you can see, document and content management, workflow, optical character recognition, case management. We're based out of the Madison area. And really there's three different divisions. We are a BPM consulting firm first. We deal with software solutions and support, and we also do have a physical records division. We're one of OnBase's largest resellers, and we're both Diamond and Platinum partners with OnBase and the Highland platform. Just a few of our customers, we deal a lot within municipalities and state government. We also do have some segments in the commercial and insurance space as we go forward, so we've been around for quite some time. OnBase itself is a single platform. Again, OnBase is developed by Highland Software based out of the Westlake, Ohio area. The single platform really handles everything, the full life cycle of content services through capture of documents, enterprise content management, business process management, case management, file sync and share, and all of that is now made available with tight security through mobile integrations and integrations with third-party products. Just a little bit more on Highland Software. Highland's been around since 1991 when they first went into business. Compounded growth every year of 15%, over 3,200 employees, 21,000 plus customers. There's a 98% retention rate year over year of customers staying on the OnBase platform. And Chuck, I know I'm going to turn this over to you. I had a question about that 100, and I'll turn it over to you and let you continue.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, just one thing too to correct. The 15% is actually the amount of revenue annually that we reinvest back into R&D. And the 100 is, I've been with Highland for 7 years, and for all 7 of those years, Fortune magazine has ranked us in the top 100 places to work in the whole country, which is pretty awesome, being that we come from Northeast Ohio. As Guy mentioned, we're located about 10 miles west of Cleveland, Ohio. So that's the overview of Highland. What I wanted to do, as Guy mentioned in the agenda, is just quickly walk through what a lot of our customers have said the current state of agenda management is in organizations that don't have an automation tool. If you do have an automation tool, some of this may not apply, but I think everyone would agree that most of these you've dealt with at one time or another to get things on meetings. And whether that's phone calls from either constituents or elected officials or department heads, whether that's coming by in person to see if they can't convince you to get an item on the meeting for tomorrow, whether it's more commonly these days letters and notes, and really common is email, right? So somebody will email you a contract or a request and try to get it on the meeting. The challenge with all of those is you really don't know if they've gone through the proper vetting process without doing a lot of work. And then once you do get it, you have that dreaded last minute request where somebody needs something to be on the meeting tomorrow or later today. And from what we've heard, this is absolutely the nightmare scenario. If we look at that, the real issue is, again, you don't know where it's been approved. You have no history. You have no audit trail. There's no transparency back into how that information got to you and how it was approved. And in these days of FOIA requests and wanting to have more transparency, that poses issues for a lot of organizations. Once you do have that meeting, this is one of the biggest things that I think I found shocking when I started working for Highland, is the amount of time that you spend putting manual packets of information together. You know, I was shocked the first couple times I went to either city council or to county commissioners and watched the clerks staff put these packets of information together. It's a huge effort. You all are, I'm sure, painfully aware of that. And then those documents really end up getting wasted because after the meeting, if you're preparing 10 or 12 copies of those, probably 9 of those 10, or, you know, depending on how many you're keeping for notes, end up in the recycle bin or the trash bin. And really, this all adds up to stress for you, right? So being able to deal with all this information, get that meeting done, and doing it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis is just stressful. If we look at the OnBase agenda management tool, these are the high-level features. And between Guy and I, we're going to walk you through, you know, most of these today. The first thing is this leverages that core OnBase functionality. So that platform that Guy talked about, that's what we're leveraging. That's what this is built on. You don't have to use the OnBase document management system to use Agenda, but by default, you're kind of getting it under the covers. We can do this in a cloud or a premise-based deployment, and we also have some licensing options that would support either of those. We can manage a huge variety of meetings. So again, if you're in a municipality, we can not only run the city council meetings, but you can do things like zoning board of appeals or the Parks and Recreation Board. Any meeting that you want to run with Agenda Manager can be done and can be set up. This is the key. We automate that creation and routing of those agenda items. So we're not only dealing with the meeting and building those packets, which is important, but we're actually dealing with the workflow and the routing of agenda requests before they get to the clerk's office. And then, of course, as I said, you know, compiling those meeting documents, building the agenda packets, publishing it out, and really making that process painless. We provide a number of means to record motions and votes in minutes. We're going to talk about our new interactive voting in the session today, but we also have the ability, if you don't want to have automatic voting from the people, you know, the attendees or the meeting body, you can actually record those votes manually. We offer streaming and on-demand audio and video. So if you're doing video, we can link into that. And we also have a number of smaller jurisdictions that just record audio. The system includes a customizable web portal that allows you to publish out to a website the meeting information, including the video. And once that video is published in an on-demand scenario, it actually ends up being indexed so that people can click on items and advance or rewind the video to the appropriate point in the meeting. And then this last one is one that I always like to stress. Because this is built on a document management and workflow platform, we can handle post-meeting actions. So if there was an agenda item to approve a purchase, let's say, of Highland software, we could actually run a post-meeting task to pull the contract that was approved at the meeting out of that meeting and run it through its own signature process. And that's a huge differentiation for us compared to some of the other products that are out there. When we look at agenda management, and I'm not going to read all these individual icons, but we manage all phases of the meeting and do it all within the OnBase platform. So all the way from the creation of the item to routing it to workflow, to creating the documents, to publishing them, and then during the meeting, being able to have you record the minutes, stream the video, and record the voting. And then post-meeting, using that same public access cloud, we're going to be able to actually publish out to your constituents the summaries, the minutes, and the on-demand video, all in that same platform. So the result, again, less stress, less waste, and better meetings across the board for your organization. I'll turn it back over to Guy to walk through the core part of the actual agenda solution, and then I'll join when we start talking about the voting piece.
All right. Thanks, Chuck. So in the interest of time here, we're going to show you just some of the highlights of the agenda management process. And oftentimes the beginning of this process really is now having somebody within your office create an agenda item. And for those people that might be familiar with OnBase and the existing agenda management tool, the rest of the platform, this is actually an OnBase Unity form. This is something new that was recently introduced that really now allows anybody that has an OnBase client available to them to complete an agenda item and start that routing process. This does not place that agenda item on a meeting yet. That always comes back to the clerk's office. So whether we start with that agenda item here or we start directly from the agenda client, and that's what we're looking at within this particular interface, where you can see, just taking a look, we have our different workflow items. These are the things that have already been processed or are somewhere within process where I can see the status of all those items. This is really that clerk's view, or the ability to search for meetings or agenda items. But one of the things that we can do is now create this agenda item directly from the agenda client, which allows us to utilize either that new Unity form, or we can still use that legacy form for those people that are familiar, again, with the existing agenda management client that brings up that exact same form. So again, we can originate back within natively OnBase or within the agenda management client. And these forms are smart. It looks like nothing right now, but as we go through, when we use the drop-down menus to choose the appropriate meeting type, from there, we're going to be presented with the drop-down for all of the different potential target meetings that are already on the schedule for that meeting type. But then as soon as I select that ownership group or the department, then we start exposing additional details on this form. And this form is completely configurable. A user, a system administrator, I should probably correct myself there, we can configure this form in a variety of different ways. If you need additional fields to capture for your agenda items, we can surely do that. If this is too much for you, you can strip it down. But out of the box, this is what we're presenting to you for a baseline system that can completely be configured. And notice as we now start getting down towards the bottom, we can choose whether we want this to go through workflow or whether this needs to go through finance or legal review, depending upon that particular agenda item. I do also want to call out down towards that bottom, though, after I populate some of this information, that we have the ability to attach different items to this agenda item itself, whether that be a summary sheet, whether it be any other type of attachment. But we also now have a section where we can now capture notes. So a user could go ahead and create a new note, save that note, and you can see that we keep that entire notes history within this form. So this really becomes a major communication mechanism for anybody that's involved within that agenda review process. Once we save this agenda item, the workflow process can begin. And notice some of the different things that we have up here on this ribbon bar up towards the top. These are the different workflow items that, again, are highly configurable depending upon what's necessary for your environment. But one of the items that we do have is the ability to go ahead and generate a summary sheet, whether you call that a cover page, whatever the case might be. This is calling a Microsoft Word template behind the scenes and now mapping the different information that we have on this particular form into a nicely constructed document, which then automatically gets attached to this agenda item and goes along with the routing. For me to actually take a look at that and open that up, notice this is Microsoft Word now, fully functional with revision control. But again, I'm just mapping the information that was on that form to a Word document, where this now becomes a very nice summary sheet that's ultimately going to be used for the rest of the process for that agenda item once we actually publish it. We don't actually publish that form, we publish the summary out on your website. But once that workflow process starts, rather than having people remembering to go into OnBase or the agenda management client, we send email notifications to the different individuals that need to review that particular item. OnBase works very nicely with Microsoft Outlook and the entire Exchange platform, whether you have Exchange running or you're running Office 365, assuming that you have a locally installed Microsoft Outlook client. We can route that information where you can see directly within the email message, we bring the workflow actions directly to that particular user. And with the ability down in the bottom here, you can see I can show that primary item, which brings that same routing form that we saw before directly to that user within the Outlook interface, where again, they have the ability to attach additional items, update this information, add any particular notes, so on and so forth. They can ultimately then take whatever action. Again, the workflow is going to be configured specific to what your needs are. In this case, rather than getting into all the details, we're going to say this does not need to go to finance or legal. We're just going to approve this item, but there's different workflow tasks to send this to somebody specific that might need to take a look at this, to maybe just make some changes and send it back one level to allow them to review what changes that you had. It's a very, very flexible workflow environment that can be configured, again, specific to your environment. But when that agenda item is approved, you can see all that we're really doing is updating the email message with some information down at the bottom of it, telling you still, if you keep that email message itself, that you did take some action on that particular item, because nothing would stop that user from keeping that email message forever and forever in their inbox. But then that really kind of now gets us to the point where after that agenda item has gone through that entire review process, whatever that might be, this is really now the view where we've pulled up a future meeting. We have the meeting agenda, the template for that meeting agenda on the left-hand side, and that's highly configurable also. But it's very, very simple now to take any of the agenda items that we have, like this one for that conditional use permit for that residential land use, in the lower right-hand corner, we just drag and drop that to the appropriate section of the agenda wherever we want that to be. We have still that complete control to double-click on any one of those items to bring open that agenda item, to bring open any of the attachments. But really, that's as simple as it is now, constructing the different agenda items onto any upcoming agenda. As we go along here, we also now have the ability directly through this client to create any of the different documents that might be needed. So as Chuck was mentioning before, putting together the packets, putting together the agenda, the minutes, let the system do that. Again, all that we really do is behind the scenes is we put together a Microsoft Word template for something like the agenda. The user, the clerk, or whomever's in the clerk office that's running this comes in here and says, let's create that agenda. That now becomes a document that we see over on the right-hand side. And I've also created the packet here. A double click is going to actually open up those different items. When we're now ready to get to the point where we're saying, let's make this information public, we want this now available on our website. All that it really is saying, let's go ahead and publish that particular item. I'm publishing my agenda, which now communicates with our website seamlessly. So a user doesn't have to make a copy of this file. You have to go to the website. You have to edit the website. No, this is all happening just through a push of a button, where now the baseline of what it looks like for your website, and given we can customize the color schemes with this, we can put your logos on it rather than OnBase's logo. make this look in a variety of different ways to fit in with however your website's constructed. But I can see this upcoming meeting now with my different links on the right-hand side, my agenda packet, where if somebody wants to take a look at that agenda, they just click on that link. That will open up a new tab. That same agenda, however we last left it inside of OnBase when we published it, is going to appear. Now, this is truly an HTML page, which means that we have all the hyperlinks still enabled. So if we come down here and say, let's go ahead and open up that resolution that we routed through the process, that brings up the item details in the upper right-hand corner. Our supporting documents are all available. So for somebody to take a look at that cover sheet now, they just click on that supporting document link for the cover sheet. That brings up a PDF rendition of that item summary sheet that we had previously created. So it's no longer editable, obviously, from a constituent access perspective. But that's a very, very quick run-through of that whole pre-meeting process. Getting into the actual meeting itself, I'm going to turn things back over to Chuck to talk through some of the newer voting capabilities of the OnBase agenda management.
Great, thanks, Guy.
Chuck, I think you might have muted yourself. I lost you.
There we go. How's that?
Much better.
We've had, for a number of years, the ability to record voting in the minutes client within the agenda solution. And last year, we actually introduced interactive voting that allows each of your voting clients to interact with the meeting, automatically records their vote, and then also has a voting display for the public. So you would have in the council chambers or the commissioner's meeting room the ability to display that voting result along with some other information on a large screen monitor. Ended up muting myself when I try to advance the slide. This is actually what that minutes client looks like. It's a little bit busy here, but it does allow you to have the clerk actually control which items are active. You can see the item section on the calendar. You can also see each of the voting members as they cast their votes, which is really nice. That is also the point where we tie in to bookmark the video. So as you activate an item on that minutes client, that's what bookmarks the video. This is what the council display monitor would look like at the beginning of the meeting to say that here's today's meeting and this is the fact that the meeting has started. As you go through, each of your counselors or commissioners would actually authenticate into the voting client, and then this is what they would see. And as that meeting becomes active, each of the items or each of the sections on the meeting would be activated, and the client would get a visual view of that. They can also click on each of the supporting documents. In this case, they're looking at the minutes from the previous meeting, so they'd be able to review that document from their client. And then as you go through, and as the clerk, as you indicate that an item is being discussed, the visual on the voting client shows that green bar to say this is the section that we are currently discussing. You do have the ability to highlight, in this case, a consent calendar, to highlight multiple items and allow you to actually vote on or record the votes for multiple items, either verbally or by a vote. And as each of those items is presented, in this case, the consent calendar, the monitor in chambers will actually show exactly what you're discussing, along with all the details that you choose to reveal. As things become current, you can open the item up for discussion. The counselors and the voters can actually make motions to approve. They can second those motions. They can withdraw the motion. They can withdraw the second of the motion. And then when it finally comes time for a vote, you'll automatically be able to expose their voting choices. In this case, we have it configured for against, abstain, and recuse. So this allows you to actually change those to whatever the appropriate terminology and appropriate options are for your meeting body. And then obviously we can take and withdraw a vote if we wanted to. Once the votes are completed, you can actually record those. You can see the details of who voted and how they voted, and you can determine if the motion passes. That determination of pass or fail is a decision that you get to make as a clerk. We don't do that automatically because we have found that some organizations need a supermajority instead of just a simple majority. So in the recording, in the minutes client, you would actually record whether or not it passed or failed. And then again, on that voting display in council chambers, you would see the voting summary. Now again, you don't have to do this, but most of our organizations do like to see it for the visibility. So you can see who voted for it, who voted against it, and then what the vote totals were. The other piece that's key in the minutes client is the ability to manage public speakers. So if you have people sign up to speak either in support or against an agenda item, you can actually manage those public speakers here. In this case, we're seeing that Sally Jones is speaking and she's 24 seconds over her allotment of time. You can take and change those times. You can stop the speaker, and each person actually on the dais actually sees the same thing. So this is the view. The first view that I had is the view you would have of the minutes client, and then this is the view that each of the voting members of the meeting body would see. So they'd be able to maybe address the person by name or see who they are. They can see when that time is running, and then they can also see if the time has been exceeded. This is what the public would see on the monitor. So again, you're seeing that Bob Smith, the CEO of Petrol Co., is actually speaking. He's been speaking for 7 seconds. He's got 1 minute and 53 left. And then if he goes over, they would actually show that as well. So that's kind of the minutes client and the ability to show on the public the speaker management. This piece is going to kind of be a quick recap. We actually have one of our customers, Wasatch County, who is actually using OnBase Agenda that we borrowed this from. But as Guy showed you earlier, the OnBase Agenda online portal can be embedded in your website and then be searchable. So if you Google Wasatch County agendas, you'll actually get to this page. But this is once we've opened a meeting. So in this case, this is the June 6th of 2019 meeting. The interesting thing here is, again, the video is completely embedded in the player. This is a configurable, responsive design. So if I was looking at this on an iPad or even on a phone, it changes in response to the constraints of the device. But more importantly, when I click on an agenda item, it's actually going to take and highlight that agenda item and then advance or rewind the video to that point of the conversation. So it allows me to actually pinpoint the discussions that I want to hear without necessarily having to listen to the whole meeting. Again, that's accomplished because in that minutes client, you're actually bookmarking as you activate an item and open it for discussion. We're recording the date and time where that bookmark has occurred. The one thing here, Wasatch County is actually using the Highland Software Cloud to host those videos. So you don't have to worry about getting, an inordinate amount of network traffic across your network. It's hosted in our cloud and it's a subscription basis. And then we also offer the ability to host that video in YouTube, and we retain that same exact feature set where clicking on an item actually advances or rewinds the video to that point of the conversation. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in seeing this, you can go to Wasatch County's website. We have a number of other ones as well. And also on the OnBase Agenda Online website, it lets you go back and actually search meetings, or you can go back and retrieve. So if I wanted to say, look for every instance where Wasatch County discussed Highland Software, with the full text search option, you have the ability to search those meetings and find every single meeting item where Highland software appears in the meeting. And then lastly,
that came through that I think that we just addressed right at the end there. There was a question pertaining to ADA compliance or accessibility, and just as Chuck had mentioned there, that whole web view, we do have that ADA compliance accessible view that's available. With that, there are no other questions. We will stick on the webinar for a few more minutes afterwards, so if you do have any questions, please still use that question panel, but we fully realize that you all have busy days, so we thank you again for taking the time, and feel free to go ahead and jump off at any moment here, and we thank you again.
Hey, Guy, just to chime in on that, on the ADA compliance issue, we, again, that portal, when we have that accessible view, changes it for screen readers. We actually do have our product management team writing up a document talking about how you can publish accessible documents. So it goes a little bit beyond just that accessible view. And if you do have specific questions on that, we'd be happy to talk with you. Just reach back out to the team at Navient, and we'll get the appropriate people from Highland to talk with you about accessibility. Other than that, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you again. Just to continue with any other questions, there are a bunch of additional ones that are coming through. And unfortunately, as people keep on asking the questions, I'm seeing my screen scroll too much. Can you show how the minutes are created after the meeting? Well, we don't have anything specifically configured within this demonstration for that. Really, the same thing happens as Chuck had shown before. We have that whole minutes client, which really now allows a clerk to dynamically take minutes during the meeting, recording all of the motions, all of the minutes. That oftentimes happens in the evening, that we're well aware of. The next day, we have the ability to go ahead and clean those minutes up within the OnBase agenda management client. But frankly, it's as simple as just saying, let's go ahead and generate now the minutes document. Again, behind the scenes, we have that template that's available that is now putting that in whatever format that works for your municipality, your agency. And again, to publish that is as simple as clicking on that publish button. Things move out to that website very simply.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. So the template works similar to what Guy showed you with generating that staff report. So as you're recording minutes, as you're recording voting, as you're recording roll call in that minutes client, we can extract all that information out and publish it back into, or I should say merge it back into a Word file. And then you have the ability, if you want to go in, as Guy said, and clean that up or change the formatting, and then publish that out exactly as he showed you, publishing the agenda and the packet. Full disclosure, we have a lot of people that don't want to take the minutes in the minutes client. They'll go back and listen to the video or listen to the audio or watch the video and then transcribe notes. So we also give you the ability to document that minutes outside of OnBase and then upload that minutes document as your official record. The only downside of that is if you use the minutes client and the document produced there, that bookmarking actually is what ties to that. So you'll be able to bookmark the minutes view as well. So we can, again, we can work with you on that, or if you do have, interest, we can certainly set up a custom demonstration and walk you through a live demonstration. We didn't do it here just in the interest of time.
Right. Chuck, here's another question I want to pose to you. Who needs to add public speakers? I think it's referring to, again, that public speaker piece. I believe that the clerk does that.
Yeah, the clerk would add it. We do have a request to actually have that be something where people can sign up themselves, like at a dais, and actually sign up automatically. We don't have that yet, but it's one of the things we've been discussing. So typically we see people either gathering that information manually and then the clerk or the clerk designate adding it to the meeting, adding those people to the meeting.
Mm-hmm. Here's another question. Could you explain how you handle closed sessions in meetings? Chuck, I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, great question. So if you look at that meeting tree that Guy showed you, that's configured for each meeting body. And we can actually go in and mark a session as closed session. When that happens, closed sessions don't get published to the portal, and they also don't get included in the meeting packet. So it's basically exactly what you intend, which is a closed session. We do have the ability to generate closed session or confidential packets for internal users. So that's definitely there. The other thing that's semi-related to that is if there were items, let's say that it wasn't a closed session, but there was something confidential that you didn't want to publish out, without a FOIA request or something like that, you can actually mark individual items on agenda items as confidential, which will keep those from being published out or included as part of the packet. So it's as simple as right-clicking on a section and saying closed session, and again, it'll be omitted from the portal and omitted from the meeting packet.
Chuck, I know that this might be a very big question, but maybe you can provide a little bit of a summary to address how the contracts signing post-meeting might actually work.
Yeah, I mean, it's really up to the organization to tell us how they want that to work. So what would happen is post-meeting, you would have, an extract completed items or, whatever you want to call that process. And we would go through that meeting programmatically using the OnBase workflow engine and basically say, okay, go find me every item that passed, that was approved, and then look in those agenda items and tell me if there's a contract related to them. And if there is a contract, again, because it's the OnBase workflow engine, I can look at that contract and say, oh, this is for software. It needs to go to this person for signature. Or it's again, new John Deere mowers for the Parks Department. It needs to go here for signature. So those items would be automatically pulled out of the meeting and then routed through whatever signature workflow you choose. OnBase has an optional DocuSign integration. If that is if you wanted to use that service, we could do that. It just depends on each organization. The two things that I don't like to really bring up and discuss are electronic signatures and microfilm, because I have found those to be two very emotional issues. But we can basically adapt that process to whatever signature process you need, including something like DocuSign or something as simple as I'm going to put that document in a queue, we're going to print it, we're going to get wet signatures, and then we're going to scan it back in as a revision to the document. So my opinion there is, we don't have to be flexible. We can meet whatever, or you don't have to change. We can be flexible and meet whatever requirements you have for that signature process. So sorry, that was a little rambling, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense to me, and hopefully it made sense to everybody else. We do have more questions. So Chuck, I'll try to address this one. The question is the Outlook module required for the email interaction piece that was demoed earlier? Not necessarily. How I demonstrated it to you, where the user had the ability to interact with workflow directly within the email message itself, that is that integration for Microsoft Outlook piece that we're talking about. But if instead we wanted to include a hyperlink to the OnBase client, so clicking on that hyperlink would take them directly to that agenda item that requires their attention, but they would actually be leaving Outlook and going into another OnBase client. That component does not require the Outlook integration. Just natively sending a notification to somebody saying there is an item that requires your attention, that does not require the Outlook integration. It's really just the piece to bring the workflow interface directly to the user within the Outlook client that does require that integration. When you publish with attachments, will that option exclude confidential items? Yes. So there are some different options, and maybe Chuck, you can probably embellish this, but one of the items, as we talked about before, marking any confidential item or closed session pieces can be excluded from any of the packets that are being generated.
Yeah,
Chuck,
that's
anything more to
correct.
add to that?
Yeah, that's correct. So it has the ability to say either exclude this document from the packet or mark it confidential, and it behaves a little differently. So excluding it from the packet is exactly what it sounds like. Marking it confidential, you could theoretically still allow it to be in the packet, but so that your internal users can see it. But then when you publish it to the portal, you would exclude it from that supporting items list. So we have a lot of flexibility there.
Mm-hmm. There's a follow-up that was very similar to that with confidential items being excluded from publishing. So I think we just answered that question. And two more at this point in time that we still have. Can the public see the detailed results of each voter on the public monitor? Chuck, does that question make sense?
I keep muting and unmuting.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, that monitor can display the voting of each item. So if I'm hearing that question correctly, I think that's what you mean. What we don't show on that monitor is if Guy voted on 6 things, show me all of Guy's votes. That's obviously in the database and we could extract that, but the monitor itself is driven off of the meeting item. So it would show that Guy voted yes, I voted no on an item, but it wouldn't necessarily say, here's all the votes that Guy had today. And I'm not sure if that's how you're asking the question, but that's the way that it works.
And really just the last question, will this webinar be recorded and available for access so it can be shared with other staff? Yes, we are recording as we speak right now. Every attendee will get an email, I believe, from our marketing staff with the link to the video as we store it up on YouTube or available through Navient's website. So with that, I think that concludes all the questions. Again, thank you so much for taking the time today. We hope that you found this valuable. Please reach out to us in any form or fashion for any follow-up questions that you might have. And thank you so much again. Take care, everybody.